بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're all well. We're going to begin chapter 3 today. We did begin it last week, but I want to rejoin down that particular line. I want to give it some more explanation. So we start with the line ظلمت سنة من أحيا الظلام إلى أن اشتكت قدماه الضر من ورمي. I want to kind of go through different aspects of this line and why it's so important. This is the first line of chapter 3. Chapter 3 is the chapter in which the Prophet ﷺ is introduced. He's not introduced in any other chapter prior to that. And he's introduced here, like I mentioned in the last lesson, or he's inferred with the word man, ظَلَمْتُ سُنَّةَ مَنْ أَحْيَا. So it's still not clear who he's talking about. If it was somebody who were reading the poem and they had no idea of what the poem's about or the kind of background or the genre. So I want to break down some of the words and then look at some ahadith and also at this concept of anishtakat qadama durra min warami. So Abu Siri writes, ظَلَمْتُ سُنَّةَ مَنْ أَحْيَا. I mentioned last week was a dhalama. It means to cast darkness on something. That's why it's used often to mean oppression, a dhulm. Although the word dhulm in Arabic, generally speaking, it's وضع الشيء في غير موضعه. Dhulm, when we talk about oppression, it's generally defined as putting something in a place it doesn't belong. In a place it doesn't belong. But dhulm here has two variant meanings. You can say ظلمت سنة من أحيا, which could infer taraktu sunnata man ahya, that I left the sunnah. It's more of a complaint following on from the previous lines of, Busiri showing his weakness for not fulfilling his duty as he feels is necessary. Now the word sunnah is an interesting word. We talked a little bit about it last week, but linguistically speaking, what's meant here is tariqah, or the way, meaning I left the way of the Prophet sallallahu نقصت طريقة الشارع. Maqlash states, I fell short, or I نقصت, meaning I fell short, you could say. طريقة الشارع, in the way of the lawmaker, in this case the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. ومن يقوى على الاتيان بها. And who can fulfill it perfectly anyway? Who could ever fulfill the sunnah perfectly or that particular way? So he then says, Maqlas says, وَهَذَا يَدُلُّكَ عَلَى أَنَّ اعْتِرَافَهُ لَمْ يَكُنْ بِمَا يَنْقُصُ مِنْ قَدْرِهِ وَيَدُلُّ عَلى صِحَّةِ هَذَا الْقَصْدِ. So there's an inference here, and we kind of accept this as well, is the fact that he's not saying that he left, or it's rather the case that it could have been not any fault of his own, but humans are incapable of fulfilling that the way that, or every human will feel that they fell short in following the path of the Messenger of God. So we have the word ahya, then adhalama, to give life, ahya, and Ibn Ajiba says ahya here means literally to give life. But we know there's certain hadith that in one hadith in Tirmidhi, which states, and this brings nicely into this particular topic. Ibn Ajiba entertains this for a while, of this prophetic light that we have, the idea of the light of the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam. So there's a hadith in Tirmidhi narrated Abdullah ibn Abbas, I think, about when the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam came into Medina Munawwara, then everything was glowing, or there was a tangible light in Medina Munawwara, and it disappeared on the moment that he left this world. Is that to be understood literally or metaphorically? Are we to understand that literally when the Messenger of God came, there was almost this light in the horizon that one could see due to the Messenger of God being there, due to him? Or do we take it to be metaphoric that when the Messenger of God entered Medina Munawwara, that because the wording is ada'a kulla shay. He gave light to everything. Does it mean metaphorically that through him being there, the atmosphere of Medina Munawwara, the effect of his spiritual state, alayhi salatu wasalam, him merely being there and being amongst the people. So that's an interesting point. So there's that hadith. There are a few other hadiths similar that mention the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam and this concept of light. So Ibn Ajiba adds a few of these, and he says there are reports that have been transmitted concerning the night vigils of the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam. So before that, sorry, he wrote, in this couplet, the author says that the Prophet enlivened the dark nights. This is metaphorical, for dark nights are not characterized by life, and I mentioned that last week. Now, in terms of this light that we're talking about, Busiri clearly seems to take the path here of picking one topic about that particular light, and he takes it to be the prayer. That as Ibn Ajiba mentions, the nighttime is not something that you give life to. You give life to things that are that have life in the first place, not to abstract ideas. So clearly he means something else here, not life, but one. When we say even in English, when the idea or the concept of let's say nightlife, what life is like in the nighttime. So we do attribute this idea of being alive in the nighttime. That's for shar, that particular statement in English. But we have a concept in our religion of you could call it a nightlife as well, a life in the nighttime where somebody is, because a point of that is that somebody is receives something or is excited at that time, or there's a buzz about that time. For us, it's different. It's more to do with a ritual idea and a devotional idea, that the nighttime is a time that, and we're going to go through many, many things that Ibn Ajiba mentions today, inshallah, about the nighttime. The nighttime, as Ghazali said, the nighttime is for the saint and the sinner, meaning it makes the saint and the sinner. The saints are made in the nighttime, and also the sinners are made in the nighttime. Because al-layla kafira, the nighttime, as the poet said, awal-laylu kafira, the night is a kafir. A kafara means to cover something, it covers everything. And that's why the most pious actions are also covered in the nighttime, meaning it's between you and Allah. And also the shar, the evil, is covered in the world as well. In terms of the light itself of the Messenger of God, ahya dhalama ila, meaning, nawwara al-dhalam. This discussion or debate about prophetic light, like in the Quran, قد جاءكم من الله نور وكتاب مبين لقد جاءكم من الله نور وكتاب مبين, that from God has come a light and a manifest book, explanatory book, or clear book rather. Now, very interestingly, this is a very late debate. It's not early debate. This idea is the Prophet made of light. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam khuliqa min nur. It is a very late debate, and in all honesty, it doesn't serve that much importance. Anyway, in the sense that what the Messenger was created from is not a point of theology in any way or form. How the Messenger was created is not a point of theology. That's number one. Number two, it's become quite a sectarian debate now, especially in the subcontinent. And I do fail to understand what it actually was trying to be achieved here. If we're saying that there's a camp of people who are devaluing the Messenger of God and making them like normal human beings, then that should be responded to correctly. And nobody should ever see the Messenger of God as like us. In many hadith are clear on that. The Messenger of God is nothing like us, in fact. He's meaning his state of being in any way or form. nothing like normal human beings. And anybody who says that is missed the point and misunderstood hadith and misunderstood Quran really. But to now say that the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam is created from light. Yes, some of the ulama have said that. For one of them is Ibrahim Bajuri, for instance. He argues that point in his commentary of the Burda. Actually, he said that in the muhaqqiqeen, that some of the more research scholars suggest that the Prophet ﷺ was created from light. What that means and what that means is it has to be explained by. So certain ulama did take that kind of idea or path or that philosophy of the Messenger of God was created from light. But then what part was it? The soul that was created from light? Was a body created from light? Then there's that whole debate. But it is a very late debate, and I don't see it as serving much importance. Overall, it's not a matter of faith. In terms of the hadith, and there are evidences for it, about this physical light of the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam, that was almost carried by prophets from one prophet to the other until it manifested, you could say, in the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam, this kind of tangible physical light that you could see. There are many hadith for that. This idea that there was a perceivable light that you could see on the face of the Messenger of God and in the body of the Messenger of God that people could actually see, and they could see on his face alayhi salatu wasalam. That many hadith do mention. But then the other discussion is slightly different, which is, was the Messenger of God created from light? There's a discussion, and in terms of the hadith itself, meaning fihi bahath, the ulama discussed that. In terms of the hadith itself, awwalu ma khalaqa Allahu, awwala ma khalaqa Allahu nuri, the first thing that God created was my light. The hadith has no basis really. That particular narration that's mentioned by Qastalani, for instance, is Muwahib. It really doesn't have, it's circulated, but I mean, it has no chain. Suyuti said, La asal, it has no asal, there's a foundation. So that particular narration is not really an evidence for that topic. I think people who argue it correctly can use other evidences. That particular narration, I don't believe it serves much purpose, because if you read a longer narration, it's quite problematic actually, certain parts of it. But some just have that particular, take that, but I don't believe the hadith has any chain of narration. And according to the muhaddithin, it would be according to the pure kind of rule, criteria of the scholars of hadith, the hadith really wouldn't be accepted. If some accept it, then okay, that's fine. It's not a problem. Some have accepted it before, some of the later scholars, but it doesn't really fulfill the criteria. And I don't think you really require it. If you want to argue that point, there are other kind of evidences, inferences you can use. I want to open up this next line, which it states, وَإِنِ اشْتَقَتْ قَدَمَاهُ ضُرًّا مِنْ وَرَمِي, until from shikwa, this word, إِنِ اشْتَقَتْ قَدَمَاهُ, shikwa means to complain. Shaka alayhi, yani he complained about him or to him. Qadamahu, from the word qadam, which means foot. Qadamahu, his feet complained, until his feet complained. When in Arabic we say ila an, it means until his feet complained. Of ad-dur, meaning of pain. Min waram. Warima yarimu in Arabic means to swell. Warima yarimu means to swell. So min warami, from swelling. Now this is an inference to particular narrations of the Prophet and of his nighttime. Now I'm going to mention some of them. There's a narration, several that Ibn Maklash and many that Ibn Ajiba mentions. So he mentions some particular narrations about the Prophet and I'm going to quote one of them. And that is from Sayyidah Aisha. And Annahu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam salla hatta tawarramat qadamahu, that the Prophet sallallahu, and this narrated by Imam al-Bukhari, would pray until his feet would swell. And there are two reasons for this, or two narrations for this. All of the narrations that talk about this are sound. We know that the Prophet ﷺ, there was nothing that he did except that it was beyond the point of call. It was something that had ajab in it, that was amazing. That the prayer of the Prophet, the standing of the Prophet, the sitting of the Prophet, the sleeping of the Prophet, the leaning of the Prophet alayhi salatu, all of these things were in and of themselves were, you could say, they were special and they were magnificent in and of themselves. They were all different to what normal people would do. And we definitely know that from various narrations. So, as mentioned in this hadith, وبعضهم يحكي أيضا عن عطاء أنه سأل عائشة. So there's a narration also that Aisha saw it, and عطاء ibn Abi Rabah al-Qurashi asked Aisha about it, and he asked her about the ahwal Rasulillah, about the different states and circumstances of the Prophet, like, you know, what was he like at night, etc. All these different things, like what were his different states of affairs. And وأن تحدثه عن أعجب ما رأت من أفعاله, and he would ask, what were the most amazing things that you saw from the Prophet? So that was his question. She said, وَأَيُّ شَيْءٍ لَمْ يَكُنْ مِنْ أَفْعَالِهِ عَلَيْهِ عَجَبًا. She said, what do you mean? What were the most amazing? What was it that wasn't amazing that came from the actions of the Prophet? Was there something that wasn't amazing? Considering that the Prophet is the best of all God's creation, and by that we mean everything. He is khayru khalq. Khalq includes all things. Yeah. So, and his actions, every one of them, one can learn from. وَذَكَرَ مَا رَأَتْ مِنْ صَلَاةِ بِاللَّيْلِ. So she would tell some things about what he would, about his prayer at night. When she said, هنا قال إنه سأل منها أن تتركه يتعبد فلما قامت تتحسس أين هو فوجدته يصلي ما ركع إلا بكى. She would say that the Prophet ﷺ would not make ruku except that he would weep. He would not make sajda except he would weep. وَكَانَ تِلْكَ صَلَاتُهُ إِلَىٰ أَنْ أَصْبَحَ. That would be his prayer until the morning time would come. Meaning his prayer would be one greatly engrossed in the hudur ilahi, in kind of divine presence. And she would say to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, alaysa qad ghafara Allahu laka ma taqaddam min dhanbik wa ma ta'akhkhar. Now, this is the verse in the Quran, and I want to quickly, just briefly talk about this idea and the mistakes that people make in terms of this idea. Number one, the first point that I want to mention, when it comes to prophets, there are three particular categories that we must always keep in mind. The first category is that which is necessary upon prophets. I mean, this is theologically speaking. This is a theological framework that we know about, that the ulama created. Number one, that which is necessary upon prophets, i.e., not necessary as in it's enforced upon them, but rationally and conceptually, a prophet must fulfill these three ideas to be considered a prophet. In that, if these ideas do not exist, then we cannot define a person as a prophet. They are four simple things. Number one, truthfulness. They must be truthful. Number two, they must be incredibly intelligent. They must have fatana, credible intelligence. Number three, they must deliver that which God gave them to deliver. تَبْلِيغُ مَا يُؤْمَرُ بِهِ. And number four, they must be impeccable. They must have isma. Some say the fourth condition is aman, they must be trustworthy, but some interpret that to be isma. They must be impeccable prophets. This impeccability about prophets, this isma that we call, where prophets are ma'asum, they are innocent, takes us into a whole theological field that I don't want to discuss today. So try not to ask too many detailed questions about that. That will save that for a theology class. But one thing that we know for definite, that unfortunately Muslims, so that's the necessary bracket. As for that which is inconceivable, it would be the opposite of those four things. And then that which is possible. What's possible for prophets are normal things, a'rad bashariya. They can become ill. They can become unwell. Prophets can become unwell, but the illness that they would have cannot be munaffira or munfira. It can't be something that is ugly. That's inconceivable. They can have fevers and things of that like, but they can't have things that we general human beings would stay away from, like leprosy. So this idea that in the Quran that Sayyidina Ayyub was inflicted with leprosies is complete rubbish. This is taken from Israelite stories. There's no proof for it in Islam that he suffered such an illness. So anything of the kind that would put people off would really negate the whole idea of God sending them as prophets and delivering a message to people when people wouldn't come near them. So these are all Israeliyat. We can't take that to be true. So they can have normal fevers and things of that kind. And they do things that other people also do, like they eat and they marry, and things of that kind are possible. Now, when it comes to sins, when we talk about sins, the prophets are incapable of committing sin. And by sin, I mean disobedience of God, al-ma'asiyah. Prophets cannot disobey God, and disobedience is defined as that which is muta'ammid, that which one has intention to do or understands he's doing it. That's normally defined as disobedience. So disobedience, when we say one has disobeyed God, what do we mean by that? We mean that one knew that what he was doing was wrong. Why? Because we know that if somebody makes a mistake, like it's a khata, we're not talking about prophets, we're talking about a normal person, then that's overlooked. Forgetfulness is overlooked. When we talk about sin, we're talking about things that are done with intention, of course, not mistakes. So it's inconceivable that prophets can commit sin in based on that definition. That's one. So what about minor things? There's a debate about that amongst the ulama. There's a debate about that. I lean towards the position that prophets are protected from minor sins. They're protected from that. Although there was some theological debate that some of them, and Utaftazani mentions this and others, that said that it's conceivable that they can commit minor sins, meaning it's hypothetically possible. I don't lean towards that position at all. I think it's inconceivable for prophets. What we then are left with is things like nisyan, forgetfulness, or we're left with this idea of, hasanatul abrari sayyiatul muqarrabin, this idea where it's like the Sayyidina Adam and what, God told him not to eat from the tree and he ate from it, things of that kind. That falls into, I believe, in the bracket of nisyan, forgetfulness, and there's a divine intention behind that. But prophets, even through that, make tawbah to turn to Allah, meaning they turn to Allah for forgiveness for that, because they see as a shortcoming and they see as a slip. So a slip is the most one can say about it. Like in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word asa for Sayyidina Adam, and I would put it into that light. So this particular verse, where this particular statement say that Aisha says, "O Messenger of God, why do you pray this much in the night when qad ghafara, God has forgiven you that which is past from your dhanb and that which is in the future?" Now the word dhanb is a word in Arabic, and like normal words in English as well, there's something in grammar known as related verbs or related words, where a word is used in one context cannot be understood in the same way in a different context. It's called the fallacy of equivocation, where you equivocate the use of a term here with the use of a term there. So when the word dhanb is attributed to a normal person, it means sin. But when it's attributed to prophets, it means something slightly different. Some of the ulama understood this to mean when God has forgiven, because he would pray for his ummah, that God has forgiven the sins of your ummah that have gone and those in the future. Some interpreted that, but other ulama said, no, it doesn't mean that. Dhanb here would mean the perceived shortcomings that the Messenger of God feels that are his shortcomings. And we can see this in the following statement. He says, Ya Aisha, inna ikhwani min ulil azmi sabaquni, that the previous prophets, ulil azmi is in reference to the great prophets, Moses and Jesus and the great prophets. They have sabaquni, they have come before me. They have come before me. فَأَخَافُ أَنْ يَنْقُصَ حَظِّي بَيْنَهُمْ, and I fear that my portion amongst all of them is only little, or it will be decreased. Meaning, I'm doing more to be. I worship God in this way to fulfill that best of creation, you could say, title, as my brothers before me, the prophets, have come before me and they live longer lives, etc. But in another narration, it says, "Afal akuna abdun shakura," which is a famous narration. Shouldn't I be a grateful servant of God? Regardless, his ankles would swell, alayhi salatu wasalam, and so that's one hadith for him standing in the nighttime. So there's another narration as well. وَقِيلَ إِنَّهُ لَمَّا وَفَدَ عَلَيْهِ وَفْدُ الْيَهُودِ وَسَأَلُوهُ عَنْ أَشْيَاءٍ. When the Jews asked the Messenger of God about certain things, and one of those things was the soul, he promised them إِلَى بُعْدِ ذَلِكَ إِلَى بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ. He promised them that he would give them an answer. فَانْصَرَفُوا, they went. فَقَالَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَسَلَامُ فِي إِبَادَتِهِ فَأَبْطَأَ عَنْهُ الْوَحْيُ أَيَّامًا حَتَّى وَرَمَتْ. So God didn't give him the answer to those questions or to that particular question about the soul. And he carried on worshipping, continued until his ankles were swollen. And then Gabriel came and said, "Well, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ." They ask about the soul. So there's that interpretation that Maklash also gives for that. Now, Ibn Ajiba I want to move on to, who mentioned some important things. Now, Ibn Ajiba narrates many narrations, and I want to talk about the 7 benefits that he gives for the night prayer. He writes that the emissary of Allah used to join and encourage in the night vigil prayer. In one hadith, the emissary of Allah stated, Abu Hurairah, "Do you wish to have Allah's mercy upon you in life and death, and in the grave and after the resurrection?" He said, "Yes." "Then stand in the night, Abu Hurairah, and pray while desiring the good pleasure of your Lord. If you pray in the inner confines of your home," meaning away from everybody else, between you and Allah, "the light of your home in the heavens will be like the light of the celestial bodies," meaning when you look in the sky, that's how it will be with the stars. It is also related that if a person who prays the night vigil, his place of prayer on the ground weeps for him, as does the area in the heavens to which his deeds are raised. When the emissary of Allah arose to perform the night vigil prayer, he would look out upon the horizon and recite the final verses Surah Al-Imran, "Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth." The Prophet ﷺ should be emulated in this, says Ibn Ajiba. The night vigil has several benefits. So he's going to give several benefits. And he gives 7 in all. I think 7. Does he give more? 7. I'll go through all of them, inshallah. Number 1, firstly, it is an emulation of the emissary of God, meaning it is following the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. And it is following him in his sunnah. And it's one of the most, people ask about the sunnah, it's one of the most important sunnahs of the Prophet ﷺ is the night prayer. May Allah give all of us tawfiq, may He give us tawfiq to have a portion of that night prayer in our lives. Secondly, it contains an immense reward and mighty honor. It is stated in a hadith after the prescribed prayers, there is none more meritorious than the night vigil prayer. Some of the early Muslims, the early Salaf, used to say, "Were it not for the night vigil prayer, I would not have liked to remain in the world." Others would say, "The delight of the night vigil prayer is not of this world. It is but of the bounties of the hereafter that Allah has advanced to His saints in this life." On one occasion, Junaid, meaning Junaid from Baghdad, the great Imam of spirituality and of law, was seen in a dream vision after his death, and he was asked, "Was Allah done with you?" He replied, "Perished are those spiritual illusions, isharat, and past are those expressions. I have benefited from nothing save a few cycles of prayer that I used to perform in the darkness of the night." So the second point is meritorious. Number 3, Allah has extolled those who are frequent in their night vigil prayers. Allah says in the Quran, "It was but little of the night that they would sleep, and those who spend the night for their Lord prostrating and standing." So God has given a great rank meaning, the third point. Number 4, someone who prays the night vigil prayer is likely to encounter the hour during which prayers are answered. In the famous hadith, there is a part of the night which the prayer of the believer is answered. So one who prays the night vigil will likely meet that at some point. Fifthly, the time of the night vigil prayer is one wherein mercies descend and fragrant breezes fall. The Messenger of God said, during the last third of the night, our Lord descends to the lower heaven and says, in the metaphoric sense, this is of course the descent, i.e., who calls upon me that I may answer? Who asks me that I may give to him? Who seeks my forgiveness that I may forgive him? Is there anyone supplicating? And this is until the appearance of dawn. This hadith entails that the caller's prayer will be answered and the supplicant's request will be granted. Sixthly, the night vigil prayer is a genuine expression of sincerity and is free in the night and is sincerity and is free of ostentation or noticing creation. For no one makes the effort to stand in the night and give preference to it over sleep unless his faith is complete and his certainty is true. The irony is now people will put on Instagram a picture at Fajr time and says things like Fajr moments. This is riya, it's ostentation. Why are you telling people that you're up at Fajr time praying Fajr Salah? And even sometimes they put a camera in the corner recording them pray. This is nothing but ostentation. It's not of any benefit to spirituality. We hide our actions, especially those that are done in the midst of the night. So we should be very careful of revealing ourselves of that time, revealing ourselves at that time. I mean, even Donald Trump tries it, doesn't he tweet at like 3 o'clock in the morning? Unless you have a sleeping problem. Some of us have really bad sleeping problems. So, because of bad habit. So maybe it's that. Seventhly, the night vigil prayer adds blessings to increases one's life. Sleep is death and wakefulness is life. I actually don't really agree with Ibn Ajib on this point. I have to disagree with him on this point. He says the night vigil prayer adds blessing, and I agree adds blessing, but increases to one's lifespan. I don't agree with that. In fact, one can argue the opposite. The ulama who slept very little died very young. If you read the book Why We Sleep, he has a compelling argument in that if you don't sleep properly, that it will definitely harm your health. So I don't really agree with Ibn Ajib on this point. He writes, that is because sleep accounts for half of one's time. So the one who sleeps the entire night has lost half. Okay, now in that sense, yeah. I should have read on, let me. Yeah. He's saying more so, he's talking about lifespan spiritually. Oh, definitely in those terms, yeah. Yeah. If we're talking about spiritual lifespan, but then one could still argue that if you sleep very, very little for long periods, then you're going to die young, which it would have been when God decided you were going to die. But at the same time, so sleep is important. So those are the 7 benefits of the night prayer that Ibn Ajib gives. So normally I do read from the Arabic text, but I've found this translation to be very good, excellent so far, my reading of it. So Ibn Ajib's commentary has been translated to English so far, and I'm a big fan of the Burda and I am working on my own commentary on the Burda as well, my own personal commentary. And I'm quite picky about the Qasida and its translations. That's why my translation recommendation, I recommend Hala Aziza's one. It's my favorite. But and I did promise that I would give a review of this translation. So it's the only commentary that's been translated of the Burda into English is a commentary of Ibn Ajib, and I will say definitely so far my reading, and I've read up to I've read a decent amount of it, maybe a decent amount, not a decent amount, but I would say I've read up to 100 pages odd, probably a bit less, but enough to make have an opinion, I think. And it's called, you can get it in English, it's The Mainstay, a commentary on the Qasida Burda, translated by Abdul Aziz Suraka, who's I think he's American. The reason I think he may be Canadian, but I'm not sure. He's forgive my ignorance. We always mix Americans with Canadian, and he's done some excellent translations. I've been recently reading his Shamal translation, which he worked with Sheikh Hassan, which is very, very good. But it's excellent. I find it to be excellent. And the reason I find it so good is because Ibn Ajiba's commentary is full of grammar and different points, and he's managed successfully to omit the grammar points because you can't really translate them into English and preserve the points of benefit that for the masses. And I find it to be very good. So I recommend it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah yaftah alaikum.